It's a matter of days before Frank takes the stage in the Coachella desert, marking a return to perform live for the first time in 6 years. The hype is at an all-time high for fans, and they're all wondering, what should we expect? In this video, I'm going to go through the 4 scenarios that I can see playing out for Frank at Coachella. It's been 7 years since his last album, 6 years since he performed live, and 3 years since he released any music. And every Frank stan knows that we never ever get any information about Frank Ocean or his music unless Frank wants us to know himself. I mean, the man is so paranoid about leaks that he goes as far as refusing to transfer any of his music electronically. He was quoted saying once that he literally carries hard drives of his music with him to collaborate with artists in places like Brazil, carrying the drives with him when he would travel. It also seems like Frank somewhat relishes this hunger and desperation seen from his fans. Like during his Blonde release, which was torturous in itself, Frank would frequently tease the project through cryptic posts, messages, and pictures until finally he dropped the project day of with no prior official announcement. Fans who aren't as lucky to see Frank perform live at Coachella will still be able to watch along as Coachella streams Weekend 1 live. Those who are going and those who will be watching over stream are still wondering the same things though. Such things like, what songs will Frank play, what will the stage set be like, who will Frank bring out, and most importantly, will we get new music? Although we haven't heard anything directly from Frank, there's a few pieces of clues that we can piece together to get some information as to what to expect at Coachella. And that's what we're about to do. First off, I don't know any contemporary artist who's headlined a festival as big as Coachella and hasn't dropped an album in at least a few years. Also, I feel like Frank is a true artist, and performing a bunch of songs that you've already performed over the course of your whole career again is really the farthest thing from being a true artist, so I can't see Frank doing that. A performance like that reminds me of bands who do a reunion tour when they're phoning it in and simply chasing the bag rather than demonstrating their artistry. It'd be very disappointing if this were the case. Matter of fact, a great example of this is back in 2014 when Outkast did a reunion tour, and it actually kicked off with a performance at Coachella. After the multi-city tour concluded, Andre 3000 was interviewed and spoke of the whole experience in a negative light. When asked about it, he said, "We hadn't performed in 10 years, it was old songs, I'm thinking, how am I going to present these songs? I don't have nothing new to say. I felt weird about going out on stage and doing it again. I felt like people would be like, y'all are just doing it for money, and I felt like a sellout, honestly." There are 4 scenarios I can see playing out with Frank in regards to his new music at Coachella. The first scenario, Frank releases his project right before his performance. This would be very similar to how Kendrick Lamar approached his headlining spot at Coachella back in 2017. He was slated to perform on Sunday, and the Friday before he dropped his project Damn. 2 days later, he would perform the album live as a headliner at Coachella. If Frank does choose to go this route, I could see him performing a majority of the new songs, but also some of the bigger songs from his catalog off of Channel Orange and Blonde. The second scenario, Frank performs his album at Coachella without releasing it prior. This scenario is kind of similar to how he released Endless. Endless was his fully visual album that he initially released online playing as a loop. There was no actual mastered track list, and instead listeners had to go to the website and listen to the album at whichever point it happened to be on at the loop. So if he performed this at Coachella live, this again would be a stream we as viewers would be watching and listening live all together. Then I would imagine he'd release the actual album later in the week and perform it again at weekend 2 of Coachella. I would even take this one step further and say that it's very possible that Frank records his Coachella performance and then releases it as a live album. This theory does have some evidence backing it. At the end of March, a guy who goes by the name of Paperboy on Instagram posted a story where someone from Frank's team reached out to him about getting his BMW M3 shipped out to Coachella. Paperboy is known for his eclectic car collection, so it's not far off that they would reach out to him about this. From the text message, it sounds like they're attempting to mimic Frank's Nostalgia Ultra cover. Paperboy does own a white BMW M3, but the one on Nostalgia Ultra is orange, so for the first couple days they'd be wrapping it in orange, then send it to Coachella to take pictures for some cover. Maybe a cover for his live album, maybe a cover for Nostalgia Ultra to be released on streaming services because it currently isn't. Hours after Paperboy posted this story, he did take it down, which is understandable because you don't leak Frank info. A few days after though, Paperboy posted another text from Frank himself, but it was confirmed to be fake as the picture was taken from another Redditor years prior. Everyone then wrote Paperboy off, claiming he was a fraud, saying that he forged all of his texts. Call me crazy, but I wonder if he did purposely push this Frank Ocean text narrative in order to have fans dig into it further and figure out that it was fraudulent, just to cover his ass for that original real text about the car delivery. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but that first text seemed oddly specific and quite legitimate. So basically, I have hope that this live album thing could be real. Okay, the third scenario. Frank at Coachella announces a new album to be released soon. If you haven't figured out yet, I'm delivering these scenarios in order of best to worst. Although this would go against my argument for being a true artist, I would still take this scenario. Imagine Frank taking the stage, playing an hour-and-a-half set, and then leaving without announcing anything regarding new music. You remember what happened when fans thought Frank was coming out and instead Drake did at Camp Flog Gnaw? You remember when fans got mad at Kid Cudi for replacing Kanye at Rolling Loud. Basically, fans can be savages and suck. I hate these kinds of fans, but they are savage. If Frank does his whole hour-and-a-half set with no mention of new music, hell will break loose. I legit think Coachella would see this as a safety concern. So I really believe something has to happen. But that brings us to our fourth and final scenario. Before getting to that one though, if you're enjoying this video and want to support me and my friend Josh who run Tofu Media, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications to know when we drop. We release tons of short form videos about music culture as well as long form too. We will be eternally grateful. That brings us to our fourth and final scenario. Frank drops no new music and doesn't announce anything. This would suck. I know people are always saying Frank doesn't owe you anything, he's dropped masterpieces, he's impacted culture, what more can he give you, blah blah blah. And I get that, but also this guy has so much potential left. This is like when Michael Jordan left the NBA and went to the MLB in his prime. Obviously people wanted MJ to come back and keep playing basketball because he had so much potential left in him. And I get that Frank's had a tough few years with his brother passing, but I would just be really sad to hear Frank plan to not make music ever again. But nothing happening? I don't think that'll be the case. There have been clues. First, Frank's IG has been completely swept, potentially alluding to a rollout happening. Second, we know Frank's been actively writing as we actually got a track titled Come On World You Can't Go from Frank on his Blonded Radio Christmas episode. On this episode, he unpacked his grief about his brother's passing over a 9-minute self-produced instrumental where he had lines like, I try to sleep, can't get a lot, make dreams bleed into days. The release of this song tells me he still is actively writing. Third, in an interview with Rosalia, she mentioned how she was in the studio with Frank back in early 2022. During the session, Frank helped Rosalia write her opening track to her newest album. Additionally, Frank mentioned on a Blonde Radio episode that he had been in the studio on Hallucinogens recently. Fourth, a plastic plant who's a huge cultural icon in music and fashion, tweeted out in February Frank Ocean will drop his new album same week as Coachella. You heard it here first. I've been following a plastic plant for a while now, and I don't see why he would tweet this out randomly. He's never been one to be a clout chaser, so I don't think he would tweet this out randomly unless there was some legitimacy to it. Plus, he's pretty well connected in the industry as he gets invited to different events with artists and other people in the scene. In Plant we trust. Fifth and final. In the beginning of 2023, Frank re-released his Blonde vinyl, and with it came a poster. On the poster is a monologue of a recording artist who's represented as Frank talking with label executives, and he's explaining to them how the singles distribution model is more effective than more durational bodies of work. However, at the end, the monologue reads, the recording artist has since changed his mind about the singles model and is again interested in more durational bodies of work. This sounds like Frank's interested in creating an album. Regardless of what happens, I'm super excited to see Frank perform live at Coachella. Album or no album, the sun will rise again and we'll go on with our lives. But an album would be pretty cool. Perusing Reddit, these are some of the best responses I've seen regarding this whole situation. Clearly people are very anxious, nervous, excited, and ready for Frank's performance in whatever rollout he ends up going with. But let me hear from you all. What do you think will happen come Coachella? Let me know in the comments below.